All right, shalom, shalom. First and foremost, I want to give all glory and praises to Yahweh, Ba'ashem, Yahweh Shai, Ba'ashem HaKodash. Double honors to the apostles and elders of Great Millstone. Honors and salutations to the hopeful elect, pushing this word in truth and sincerity. Or this is the brother Terrell Bakah from GMS Los Angeles / Inner Empire, coming back with another video in the spirit. And once again, Thawali Yahweh, Ba'ashem, Yahweh Shai, Ba'ashem HaKodash, for opening my eyes to this truth. Allow me to wake up another day and putting the spirit on me to do another lesson in hopes to edifying the hopeful elect. Okay, so while we're going to in this video, I went to go see the latest Spider-Man movie. You know, a beloved brother told me about it. Told me it was a real good movie. I should check it out. So I went to go see the movie. And it has some spiritual nuggets in there, you know. And there was a few scenes in the movie that stood out to me, you know, that I saw in the spirit. And it made me think of, you know, the scriptures that's you know, the scriptures that I'm going to bring out, because you know, I used to watch the Spider-Man. I used to watch the Spider-Man movies back in the early 2000s with that actor Tobey Maguire. I was in during that time I was in middle school, high school. You know, so that's the Spider-Man I came up on. You know, and I think the other Spider-Mans, you know, before the current Spider-Man, the actor, I believe his name is Tom Holland. He's the new Spider-Man, which this is the first Spider-Man movie I've seen with him. So, you know, I have to do a lot of catching up, because I believe that the Spider-Man, the latest one, was the fourth one of this, you know, this current Spider-Man series. But anyway, to get to the point, you know, there was a few scenes in the movie, you know, spoiler alert, you know, if you brothers, you know, want to go see it, you know, you may want to, you know, skip this part. Okay. So in the movie, there was a few scenes. There was one particular scene where, you know, he was dealing with a lot of, you know, issues, you know, with his powers. You know, his abilities, you know, because, you know, Spider-Man, he's known, you know, to shoot webs and, you know, and be incredibly strong. So in the movie, he was dealing with being weak. You know, his power was, it seemed like he was losing control. He couldn't control his powers. You know, and then it got me thinking, because, you know, in this truth, we have a power, you know, we have abilities that the average person in this world doesn't have. Okay. You know, the ability to, you know, go into the scriptures, okay, to be able to sense things, have discernment. Okay. And that's one of the abilities Spider-Man has. It's called a Spidey sense, you know, but in the truth, you know, you could look at it as, you know, that's the spirit. The spirit alerts you to certain things, right? So in that scene where he was dealing with him, you know, struggling with his powers, you know, it got me thinking to 2 Corinthians, which I'm gonna get it real quick, because it speaks about examining ourselves, right? And the reason why, you know, they kind of alluded to it in the movie, why he was going through those things, because he was dealing with a lot of internal issues. There was a lot of things going on in his mind that he was battling. You know, there was a lot of things that he was hung up on, you know, and it was causing him, you know, to be stressed, and that was affecting his powers, you know. So he started to the point where, he crashed out. He started, he lost his cool. He was doing things that was out of his character. And, this is why it's so important for us in this truth to daily examine ourselves, man. Wherever internal problems that we have, okay, we can't, lose control. Okay, we gotta be able to, lean upon the Spirit. Okay, we can't forget why we're here. We're not here to please our flesh. And see, that was another thing he was dealing with. He missed his so-called old life. He missed being around his friends. He had a woman and shit, Mary Jane. He had those he had those moments where he was reminiscing. And sometimes that happens too. You get those thoughts. You think about what could have been. What could, if this would have happened, that would have happened. But we always gotta remember, man. Man's goings are of the Lord, man. Anytime we get those thoughts, we gotta rebuke those thoughts, man. Because we're exactly where we're supposed to be. And see them demons. Those thoughts. If you entertain it too much, it can cause you to start falling away, man. That's why it's important to keep those things in check. And that was what was fucking with Spider-Man in the movie. So I'm gonna bring out this scripture, Slaki, for the long opening. I just wanted to make that point. So I'm gonna start with this 2 Corinthians chapter 13, verse 5. It says, examine yourselves whether ye be in the faith. Prove your own selves. Know ye not your own selves how that Yahweh Shai HaMashiach is in you, except ye be reprobates. Right, so Spider-Man being a superhero, right, comes a great responsibility, because he has to go out there, he has to fight all this crime and different injustices, so-called injustices, right? But at the same time, he has to balance his regular life with him being a superhero. And you had a scene where it was a detective chick. She looked like an Ephraimite. I think she was an Ephraimite. She was telling him, hey man, you should take it easy sometime, And that also made me think about, that's what people tell us, when they see us out there on the streets. Say, man, we should do something with our lives, But this is our duty. They don't, people in the world, they don't understand that, They don't understand that, this ain't no thing to play around with. This ain't nothing to bullshit with, man. And that's the same spirit, Spider-Man had. He had that same mentality, like, man, I can't, I can't take a day off, until the end. But, pretty much during the whole movie, he was on it. He wasn't trying to hear all that, man, and that's the spirit because, brothers, we deal with those things on a daily basis, on all kind of different levels. We deal with these particular things. Okay. And that's why we have these scriptures here. Okay. I'm gonna read it again back in 2 Corinthians chapter 13, verse 5. It says, examine yourselves whether ye be in the faith. Prove your own selves. Know ye not your own selves how that Yahweh Shai HaMashiach is in you, except ye be reprobates. But I trust that ye shall know that we are not reprobates. You see that? Because he, even he started to doubt. He started to think, he was the problem. He started to think that, the powers that he had, all that responsibility, he was starting to feel the weight of all that, And that's how it is sometimes in this truth. Sometimes some things can become overwhelming, especially when brothers start to grow, brothers starts getting more responsibilities, right? And you start to feel that pressure, which really it's good, because this is the straight gate, okay? It's the reason why this is called the straight gate, because this thing wasn't meant to be easy. And we got to remember too, we went off, before we knew who we were. We was out here doing all kind of wickedness, man. We was out here sinning against the Lord, even though we didn't know, but we always got to remember, we always got to be grateful that the Lord even put the spirit on us to understand this word, to know this truth, okay? And that brings me to the other scene that stood out to me with his aunt May. Now, I didn't know too much about her character because, like I said, I haven't watched a Spider-Man movie since the old one back in the early 2000s. So, like I said, I gotta get up to speed on the rest of the series, because this is like the fourth one. But her character her character died. She might have died in the earlier films, but he had a flashback where he was sitting down with his aunt, and his aunt was telling him, basically, I forget how she worded it word for word, but she said something to the effect of, never forget, even though you have all these powers, pretty much she was basically saying in a nutshell, don't forget to be humble, don't let these powers have you getting high-minded, don't let these things corrupt you. And then it made me think, because see me, I grew up on the old Spider-Man, okay, back in the early 2000s. It made me think back to the first Spider-Man movie where Tobey Maguire Spider-Man, he was in the car with his Uncle Ben. Brothers that know, his Uncle Ben was telling him, he made a statement to him. He said, with great power comes great responsibility, and he was kind of lecturing him, and Tobey Maguire's character, he kind of got mad, and he ended up later on, down the line, his uncle ends up getting killed. Okay, there's a scene where his uncle gets shot and he dies, and that always stuck with him, throughout the sequels. That always stuck with him. So it was similar with this latest one with his aunt. This time it was the aunt speaking words to him, and that stuck with him, and once he started to let those things sink in, he started to recenter himself, and he started gaining control over his powers again, and we always speak about that. This word, these scriptures, keeps us centered. This keeps us grounded. Okay, it keeps us on our footing. All right. So like I said, she pretty much told him, don't forget to be humble. So I'm gonna bring this up. This is this is 1 Peter chapter 5 verse 5. It says, likewise ye younger submit. Oh, sluggy. 1 Peter 5:5. It says, likewise ye younger submit yourselves unto the elder. Yeah, all of you be subject one to another, and be clothed with humility. For the Most High resisteth the proud, and giveth grace to the humble. And see, him when he didn't have control over his powers, this is what I was thinking about. It was like, that's like the spirit of the Lord was resisting, him. That's how I looked at it, spiritually, applying to this truth, because he wasn't able to, like I said, he didn't have control over his abilities. He was losing, he was becoming reckless. He was becoming a loose cannon, and that's what happens, spiritually in the truth when one loses humility, and when someone's proud, high-minded, and wise in their own eyes, they think they can do no wrong, and that often leads to bad decisions, that often leads to things that, moving in a reckless behavior, thinking that, you're invincible, thinking that you're above reproach, you're above whatever that, Jake thinks, Jake that get in that mode. That's a reckless spirit to be in. Okay. And that's a dangerous place to be, and he was in a dangerous place, so, like I said, for you brothers, if y'all want to go see the movie, y'all might want to skip, me going into those scenes, but, I recommend brothers go see that movie. It's a very spiritual movie, real good movie, All right, it says, humble yourselves, therefore, under the mighty hand of the Most High, that he may exalt you in due time. Okay, and that's what we're patiently, waiting for, because Yahweh Shai got to get his glory first. Okay, Yahweh Shai, he got to be honored and glorified. Okay, and then those that are joint heirs with him, they're going to be glorified as well. They're going to be honored. Okay, so like I said, just real quick, that was just the few things that stood out to me in the movie, because like I said, it's more to it, but I don't want to draw this thing out too long. You brothers get the drift. Like I said, it's a real good watch. Brothers should go check it out, man. So yeah, that's pretty much it. So with that, I'm gonna wrap it up. Give all glory and praises to Yahweh, Ba'ashem, Yahweh Shai, Ba'ashem HaKodash. Double honors to the apostles and the elders of Great Millstone. Honors and salutations to the hopeful elect, pushing this word in truth, sincerity. Shalom, shalom.